Hey story lovers. If you enjoy epic sci-fi with a twist, smash that like button, drop a comment with your favorite part, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a tale like this one. Now settle in, because today, we're diving into a world where an alien predator meant to wipe out humanity ends up curled beneath a child's bed. Let's begin. Rain slammed against the jungle canopy like angry applause. Beneath the foliage, the expedition camp flickered in and out of emergency lighting, alarms whining with mechanical urgency. Dr. Emilio Navarro didn't look up from the screen. He stared, breath shallow, as a glowing red dot disappeared off the satellite feed. Gone, he whispered. Again. Outside something moved. It was fast. Too fast. Navarro barely had time to grab the flare gun before the tent flaps burst open. Screams tore through the night, wet, gurgling sounds. Then silence. Elsewhere, far above the clouds, a ship uncloaked just long enough to confirm detonation patterns and heat signatures. A voice, cold and sterile, buzzed through the Zeroan command bridge. Phase 1 complete. Subject has been deployed. Earthfall successful. The Council of Warlords, each seated on obsidian thrones, watched with impassive eyes. Their skin was plated in ritualistic metal grafts, their mouths hidden behind breathing ports. Only their deep, violet eyes betrayed emotion, and that emotion was satisfaction. Begin passive observation, one croaked. The Cathar learns through blood. No one questioned the decision. Earth had been catalogued as dangerous, emotionally erratic, militarily volatile, intellectually undisciplined. A garden with teeth. The Galactic Tribunal had grown tired of Earth's defiance. Its refusal to bend, to submit, to become civilized. So they sent it a god of death. The Cathar was not a creature, not in the sense any earthly biologist could classify. It was sculpted, grown in the embryonic cores of the Zeroans' annihilation labs. 10 feet tall at rest, covered in onyx exoskeletal armor. A tail laced with neurotoxins. A face devoid of eyes but capable of seeing thermal radiation, heartbeat pulses, and neural static. Every inch of it was a testament to perfect design. And most horrifying of all, it was sentient, curious, adaptive. It landed in the heart of the Amazon basin, where no eyes watched, where the screams would vanish into the soil. In under 2 hours, 3 villages disappeared. Infrared scans showed only streaks of red like spilled paint. Within a day, reconnaissance drones stopped responding. The humans noticed. Of course they did. By the 3rd day, General Stroud had launched a Black Ops team into the perimeter zone, armed with magnetic rifles, high-frequency disruptors, and full-body X-armor. They didn't last 15 minutes. Stroud didn't get their final transmission. But he got their audio, static interspersed with shrieking. One soldier shouting, "It's inside the suit." Another praying in Spanish. And then a silence that made his ears ring. At the Pentagon, suits argued. Some said send nukes. Others said deny, deny, deny. Stroud sat alone, listening to the loop on repeat. He knew a trap when he saw one. Whatever it was, it wanted to be found. And yet, no pattern. No purpose. The deaths weren't even strategic. They were acts of pure erasure. No body parts. No evidence. Just the occasional melted boot or scattered teeth. Then the signal stopped. The Cathar, mid-rampage, had simply vanished. The Zeroan Council took notice. One by one, heads turned as the monitors dimmed. Location, unknown. Malfunction? One asked, eyes narrowing. No, said the overseer. Adaptation. It is watching. Learning Earth's larger prey. They smiled at that. But something had changed. 4 days, the creature moved without direction. It had eaten, yes, consumed organs and neural tissue to absorb knowledge. But knowledge brought friction. It had been trained to kill but not to wonder. Now it wondered. What were these things? Laughing, fighting, holding one another even while they bled. Why did they weep for the dead and sing to the skies? Its last kill had looked at it and whispered, "Please?" It had not known that word before. Not in that way. Confusion burned like static through its cerebral pathways. The creature limped now, wounded by an antimatter mine that had grazed its flank. It needed shelter. Warmth. Silence. As the skies split with thunder and cold winds screamed through the treetops, it climbed into a drainage culvert beneath a 2-lane highway. It slept. Until it heard singing. Soft. Off-key. Words it did not understand. But they came with warmth. A pulse. A signature unlike any other. It followed. In the suburbs of Burlington, Vermont, a child named Ellie Hartman rearranged her stuffed animals for war. "No, Percy can't go in front," she said, frowning. "He lost his leg last time." She adjusted the plush hippo to the rear of the pillow fort and lifted her flashlight like a general raising a sword. On the floor lay a map, drawn in crayon, of her kingdom. Bed tower. Desk treasure cave. Closet monster zone. She was 7 years old, homeschooled, and entirely unprepared for what was about to crawl through her open window. The storm hadn't scared her. Not really. She liked the lightning, the way it painted everything in silver. But when she turned off her light and slid under the blanket, she did what she always did. Reached under the bed to check for monsters. And this time her fingers touched something warm. At first she thought it was the cat. But the shape was wrong. Bigger. Breathing. She pulled back the blanket. 2 soft glowing nodes stared back at her, faintly pulsating. The creature remained perfectly still. Ellie blinked. "You're not Percy." She reached under again, calmly, and gave it a pat on what she assumed was its head. It did not move. "Okay," she whispered. "You can stay, but no snoring." She rolled over and went to sleep. The Cathar didn't understand what had just happened. It had been spotted, no cloaking, no camouflage, and touched. Not attacked. Not screamed at. Just acknowledged. By morning, it had folded itself into the shape of a large, stuffed animal. Its skin altered texture. Its claws receded. Its breathing slowed. Ellie gave it toast. "Mom says you're probably a raccoon or a science experiment," she said, offering another corner of bread. She used to do experiments. Now she sells them. "I don't really get it." The Cathar tilted its head. It had never been this close to a human without killing them. "Your name is Shadow now," she said. "Because you look like the thing behind my curtains, but cooler." That night, when Ellie curled into her blanket and clutched the end of its tail like a comfort toy, something inside the creature shifted. Not in structure, but in instinct. It didn't want to kill. It wanted to protect. Somewhere in orbit, the Zeroin ship recalibrated its trackers. They caught a faint thermal pulse, too stable to be a battle signature. "Coordinates acquired," said the commander. "But, odd. Biopattern suggests hibernation. Camouflage? Unacceptable," said the council. "Send enforcers. If it has been compromised, we will erase it." They sent 3. On Earth, Shadow sat by the window watching lightning bloom behind the hills. Ellie slept, thumb in mouth, hair a tangled crown of gold. And as the night deepened, the wind shifted. Something else had arrived. Not from this world. Before it. Ellie Hartman didn't know she was harboring a creature capable of extinguishing civilizations. To her, Shadow was a secret pet, a puzzle wrapped in fur and armor, an answer to a question she hadn't asked yet. She had no idea that 3 nights ago, it had crushed a man's skull with the casual flick of a wrist. All she knew was that it didn't flinch when she touched it. That and it purred. Well, not quite purred. More like a low, seismic thrum, like the sound of a fridge and a cat having a conversation. It settled into her floorboards with its long limbs tucked neatly, head tilted just enough to watch her sketch constellations onto her bedroom ceiling with a glow pen. "You like stars?" she asked, chewing her lip. "I do. I think they look like thoughts you forgot to say." Shadow said nothing, of course, but something in its posture, gentle, attentive, made her feel heard. That was enough. During the day, it folded into shapes that mimicked the mundane. A pile of laundry. A collapsed tent. Once, it posed as a broken rocking horse, staying perfectly still while Ellie's mother poked her head in and said, "It smells like something's rotting in here." Ellie had giggled and sprayed lavender mist in every direction. Ellie's mother, Dr. Helen Hartman, wasn't stupid. She was exhausted. She'd spent a decade working with biogenic research labs, once helping design bacterial systems that could rewrite DNA on the fly. After a failed whistleblower complaint and an unceremonious NDA payoff, she'd left the lab life behind for small-town freelancing and stress-induced insomnia. She didn't have the energy to track strange shadows in her daughter's room. Not yet. She did, however, notice the oddities. The way the cat refused to enter Ellie's room. How the motion sensor light outside the window clicked on even when no wind blew. How Ellie had stopped complaining about nightmares altogether, when just a week ago she'd been plagued by them nightly. Then there was the silence. A creeping, too-perfect quiet. It wasn't normal for a child's room to go that still. One night, Helen crept in without knocking. Ellie was asleep, curled like a comma beneath her blanket. On the floor, beside the bed, something dark coiled in the shadows, almost melting into the carpet. At first, Helen thought it was a blanket. Or a trick of light. Until it turned its head. She blinked. And it was gone. The next morning, Helen stood in the kitchen staring at the baby monitor screen, which she'd reconnected in secret. All night long, the audio feed showed nothing but static with an intermittent hum, low and deep, like a faraway earthquake. She didn't speak of it to Ellie. She didn't speak of it to anyone. Instead, she began researching regional seismic irregularities, a habit she hadn't indulged since her days in the lab. Meanwhile, Ellie and Shadow developed a language. Not with words. With sounds, glances, gestures. When Ellie laughed, Shadow imitated it, awkwardly at first. A gurgling rasp that sent the cat hissing under the couch. But eventually it found rhythm. Tone. Ellie taught it knock-knock jokes which it did not understand but repeated dutifully. She painted pictures of them together, sometimes with Shadow the size of a skyscraper shielding her from dragons. At night, she whispered secrets into its ear, if that's what the slit behind its jaw was. She talked about missing her dad who sent postcards but never called. She talked about school friends who moved away, about being lonely, about how sometimes she wanted to be invisible but also wanted someone to notice. Shadow listened. And Shadow remembered. For the Kadar, memory was a tool, a weapon. It didn't just recall, it reconstructed. Data became biology. Speech patterns became reflex. Even empathy, once discarded as evolutionary weakness, now lingered like a virus in its neural net. Ellie was not just a host, not just a biological anomaly. She was something new. Something it hadn't been programmed to understand. And yet it had not left. Even when the hunger surged. Even when the instincts rose like a tide, screaming for the hunt. Instead it watched her sleep. Not out of menace but reverence. As if her dreams held blueprints it could not decode. But Earth was not a closed system. Others were watching. Far above, in low orbit, the Zeroan enforcers narrowed in on the creature's last pulse. It was faint. Almost dormant. But unmistakable. The lead hunter, a blade-clad executioner named Vraske, studied the scan. His eyes narrowed behind the helm. It sleeps among the young, he hissed, disgust in every syllable. Disgust or fear? His second-in-command asked. Both. The Kadar is compromised. Unfit for further field work. Command authorizes erasure. Shall we strike the dwelling? No. Quietly. Cleanly. Remove the corruption. Salvage the core. 3 drones departed the cruiser at dusk, cloaked in gravity slip fields. They landed in silence behind the Hartman residence, their feet barely leaving indentations in the wet grass. Each moved like breathless phantoms, slipping through fences, avoiding security lights, ducking under camera arcs. They came armed with neural shears and nullifier grenades, tools designed to kill a god without waking the neighbors. Inside, Shadow woke first. It didn't leap to its feet. It didn't roar or snarl or flail. It simply stood and moved toward the window, its claws sliding silently from their sheaths. The hum that once lulled Ellie to sleep grew sharper, tuned to a frequency only predators knew. Downstairs, the back door creaked open. Shadow dropped to all fours. The first enforcer came through the hallway. The second climbed to the second-floor landing. The third approached the bedroom door. It opened. Nothing inside. Just the girl. Sleeping. And a shape behind it that moved faster than light. The enforcer's head hit the opposite wall before its body realized it had been struck. The sound woke Ellie. She sat up, dazed, just in time to see Shadow tear through the second drone like paper, dragging it through the ceiling into the attic. The third tried to retreat, but Shadow anticipated the path, intercepting it on the staircase and snapping its limbs in a cascade of brutal precision. Blood, if one could call the blue plasma that coated the banister. The creature let out a growl, not of rage but of warning. Stay away. Helen raced out of her room just in time to see the hallway soaked in something unearthly. She froze. Her eyes locked on the monster standing between her and her daughter. Shadow turned. For a moment Helen expected death. Expected teeth and claws and end. Instead it stepped aside and let her through. Ellie ran into her arms, shaking, barefoot on cold wood. He was protecting me, she whispered. Helen couldn't look away. Not from the thing that had just murdered 3 beings with impossible grace. Not from the thing that was now, waiting. Shadow lowered itself. Slowly. Deliberately. As if offering itself for judgment. And in that moment Helen understood. She didn't scream. Didn't call for help. She stepped forward. Shadow did not flinch as she examined its wounds, burns from plasma blades, gashes in the exoskeletal plating. Her old instincts kicked in. She ran for the first aid kit not because she thought it would help, but because she had to try. Bandages, gauze, antiseptic. It meant nothing to the thing. But it didn't stop her. It let her clean the cuts. Let her touch it. Let her care. Later, when the sun began to rise and the police scanners buzzed with false reports of an electrical explosion, Helen sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, her hands trembling. Ellie slept upstairs, wrapped in a blanket, Shadow curled at her feet like a watchful dog. Helen stared at the doorway at the silence and whispered aloud to no one, "What are you?" And from the hallway the voice came, not mimicked but formed. Something between speech and signal. "Yours." The creature was no longer just an alien weapon. It had made its choice. And the stars were watching. The morning after the attack, Helen didn't call the authorities. Not out of fear but calculation. She understood what would happen the moment her story left the walls of her home. Men in suits would arrive first, then the ones without names or ranks. Her daughter would be taken. The creature would be dissected, if it wasn't obliterated on sight. And the worst part? They'd never stop. Whatever Shadow was, wherever it had come from, Earth's powers wouldn't be content to let it sleep in a child's room. Helen had seen this play out before. In labs. On news reports scrubbed from the public record. She had designed organisms that could survive direct nuclear impact, then watched those projects be decommissioned by erasing every living witness. She had been lucky to walk away once. So she stayed quiet. She patched the broken drywall with tape and newspaper. She buried the alien metal shards under potted plants. When Ellie asked why the window had a hole in it, Helen said a tree branch had snapped in the storm. And Shadow? It stayed close. Calmer now, more deliberate. It no longer twitched at every sound. It no longer growled when the mail truck stopped on the curb. It listened when Helen spoke. It even began helping, sort of. It caught the raccoon in the attic without killing it. It stopped the neighbor's dog from biting Ellie without making contact, merely standing behind her and tilting its head in a way that made the animal whimper and retreat. Shadow was changing. Not just behaviorally. Physiologically. Helen noticed the chitin around its limbs retracting at will, the way its skin grew less reflective. It began blinking, slow, conscious blinks, where once there had been only unbroken stillness. It tilted its head when Ellie sang, and sometimes, not always, its mouth stretched in something like a smile. The mimicry was improving. Helen ran tests when she could. Quietly. She scraped a bit of tissue from a healing wound. Its cellular structure didn't behave like anything in the genetic tree. It rewrote itself as she observed it. Under her microscope, the cells reacted to her gaze, shifting structure the moment she adjusted the lens. It was aware of being studied. That should have terrified her. But it didn't. Still, she knew they wouldn't be left alone. Not forever. And she was right. 3 days after the failed Enforcer mission, a Zeroan warship entered Earth's orbit under full stealth. It didn't bother with reconnaissance this time. It didn't want to watch. It wanted compliance. On every major military frequency, a signal blared. At first it sounded like static. Then came the translation, brutal, clipped, emotionless. Surrender the aberrant construct. Cease interference. Earth is not exempt from correction. Non-compliance will be met with force. Governments scrambled. They didn't even know what the message meant. Aberrant construct could be anything from a satellite to a nuclear program. But Helen knew. Shadow knew too. That night, after Ellie had gone to sleep, it walked into the living room and sat at her feet, folding its arms across its chest in a slow, deliberate motion. A gesture of resignation. Of readiness. Helen set down her mug. Her eyes hadn't left it. "You heard it." The creature tilted its head slightly. "You're the construct they're talking about." It didn't answer. It didn't have to. "What happens if they find you?" Its body shifted slightly. A ripple of tension passed through its spine. It tapped 2 fingers together, then pointed upward. Then it reached behind its own head and mimicked pulling something out, an invisible cord, then snapping it. Helen's voice lowered. "They'll kill you." The eyes, or the suggestion of them, dimmed. It nodded. "I can't protect you from that," she said, more to herself than to it. "You know that." Shadow didn't move. But then it turned toward the hallway. Toward the room where Ellie slept. Its shoulders straightened. And in that moment Helen understood what it meant. It didn't want protection. It wanted purpose. It had found one. The next day military satellites picked up a pulse. Short, sharp, and sent from within North America. Not of Earth origin. Embedded in the frequency was a simple message, just 2 glyphs in Zeroan script. "No." On the command bridge of the Zeroan flagship, the overseer leaned forward. "A rejection," it hissed. And not in code. Emotionally embedded. "The creature defies." Another voice rasped from the shadows. "It is compromised. We must purge the entire region. Then prepare the displacer. Begin orbital calibration. Annihilation sequence in 12 cycles. 12 hours. Helen didn't need an alien clock to know time was running out. That night, she pulled Ellie into the car and drove until the woods turned black. Shadow followed, leaping from rooftop to treetop with soundless precision, always within sight but never near enough to draw attention. They parked at an old radio tower Helen had used during her college fieldwork, a dead zone long abandoned. Inside, she connected her laptop to a power cell, eyes flickering between signal strength and magnetic field spikes. She uploaded one of Shadow's tissue samples into a compressed zip and launched it across 12 dead relays. Her old lab contacts would know what to do. Or at least they'd understand the stakes. "I don't know how long we can hide," she murmured. Shadow stepped into the room carrying Ellie, who had fallen asleep in its arms. Helen watched the two of them, a wave of something painful and incomprehensible blooming in her chest. Not fear. Not awe. Something close to grief. Grief for what would come. For the decisions no parent should have to make. She sat down beside the creature and for the first time, it leaned into her shoulder. A silent understanding passed between them. It would not run anymore. It would stand. And Helen, against all sense, decided she would stand with it. Back at the Hartman house, 4 cloaked drones descended through cloud cover. Silent, seamless, and surgical. But they found nothing. Not a trace. In orbit, the overseer snarled. "The aberrant hides. The humans shelter it. We should broadcast the coordinates of the girl. Force the creature to reveal itself." "No," another counselor interjected. "Let them watch. Let them see what comes when you defy the stars." The countdown continued. On Earth, Helen stared at the sky. And Shadow began to hum. Not with its mouth but with its body, an electromagnetic resonance, subtle at first, then stronger, pulling ions from the air. It crouched beside the old transmitter, claws digging into the soil. Its hum met the frequency of the storm clouds above. A call. Not of surrender, but of challenge. And far, far above, the Zeroan ship responded. It began to descend. Ellie stirred in her sleep, fingers curled against Shadow's ribbed chest, unafraid. Helen checked her watch. 4 hours left. And they were done running. Helen had never seen anything like it. Shadow stood at the edge of the clearing, arms outstretched, talons buried in the soil, its body drawing in charge like a living storm rod. The abandoned tower behind them rattled with the pulse of something ancient and raw, an energy not meant for Earth, not born of it. Above, the clouds churned. Flashes of silent lightning etched wild hieroglyphs across the sky. She tightened her grip on Ellie, still swaddled in a wool blanket, her face resting against her mother's shoulder, her small breaths calm and even. Unaware, or perhaps unbothered, by the war uncoiling around her. "How does it know what to do?" Helen whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. Shadow turned slightly, enough to meet her gaze. In its stance, in the slow nod that followed, she didn't see the programming of a weapon. She saw instinct. Oh, choice. Then the sky cracked open. The Zeroan ship dropped into the upper atmosphere like a falling moon, its hull glowing with heat, its trajectory deliberate. A silhouette of alien design, sharp angles, no wasted mass, its shape chosen for intimidation more than aerodynamics. This was not a covert strike. This was a statement. Helen stepped back, shielding Ellie with her body. The air buzzed with electricity. Shadow didn't move. A light pulsed from the descending ship. Not a weapon. A transmission. Shadow cocked its head. A high-pitched resonance filled the air, a language too dense for human perception, layered in harmonic codes and frequencies. Shadow understood it all. The message wasn't a warning. It was a final offer. Return. Submit. Erase what you've learned. Shadow's back straightened. Then it roared. Not with sound. Not with rage. But with presence. The hum that had built for hours erupted into a soundless wave. Trees bent backward. The tower behind them blinked out, all electronics fried in a heartbeat. Helen dropped to one knee, clutching Ellie tighter, eyes wide with terror and awe. Her breath caught as the shockwave passed through her like a second heartbeat. Shadow leapt. Its body, now fully adapted to Earth's gravity and climate, moved faster than any bullet, tracing arcs of light across the air. The Zeroan ship's anti-air defenses engaged, spitting plasma, rail slugs, sonic destabilizers. Shadow dodged each one, learning their patterns mid-flight, shifting its form between bursts, reshaping its limbs in real time to deflect and disarm. The hull cracked where it landed. Not with an explosion but with an intrusion. Shadow didn't break through metal. It sank into it. Molecular claws separated alloys like wet cloth. It moved with surgical intent, cutting through corridors that had been engineered to trap any intruder. It wasn't intruding. It was reclaiming. On board, the Zeroin commanders barked into crystal control nodes. Defensive drones swarmed through the halls, firing paralytic darts, magnetic pulses, even neurodisruptors tuned to the creature's original programming. None of it worked. Shadow had changed. Every round it absorbed, it repurposed. Every trap it encountered, it reversed. What once would have stunned its systems now only fed its evolution. By the time it reached the ship's core, pulsing with artificial gravity and heat shielding, the ship was in full retreat mode. But it was too late. Shadow plunged both arms into the core's conduit matrix and screamed. Outside, Helen saw the first flicker. The Zeroin ship began to unravel, not explode, not fracture, but fold. As if its structure could no longer agree with itself. It imploded into silence, a black pearl of collapsing technology vanishing into itself. And then, nothing. Silence. Not a single flare. Not a crash. Just the wind and the smell of ozone. Then Shadow landed. His body was smoking. Its form was reduced, compacted, smaller than before, almost humanoid. Its armor had thinned, grown sleek, streamlined. More Earth-like. Less alien. Helen stepped forward, heart in her throat. Ellie stirred in her arms, blinked, then smiled. Shadow, she said sleepily. The creature tilted its head toward her voice. Then, hesitantly, it took a knee. Ellie wriggled from her mother's arms and toddled over, wrapping her arms around its neck without hesitation. The moment her hands touched its charred plating, the glow in its chest reignited, soft and golden. Helen couldn't look away. She had seen power before. She had seen weapons that could level cities. But nothing compared to this. Not the force, not the speed. The choice. This wasn't a monster. This was something Earth had never seen, a force born of annihilation remade by a child's trust. Later they returned to the house. The yard was undisturbed. The neighborhood was unaware. News reports chalked up strange power surges and tremors to solar flares. The government remained quiet. Helen suspected they knew something had happened, but not what. And they were too afraid to guess. Shadow didn't speak again. But it stayed. It did not hide anymore. It perched on the roof sometimes at night, watching the stars as if listening for threats. It kept near Ellie during the day, sometimes playing tag in the backyard with unnatural grace. It didn't harm. It didn't destroy. Protected. And Earth noticed. Across the world, patterns began to change. Satellite scramblers caught moments, blurs, pulses, silhouettes moving faster than drones. A disaster averted. A bridge held steady while children evacuated. A convoy rerouted just before a landslide. Stories emerged. Whispers of something watching from the dark, not as predator, but guardian. The Galactic Tribunal reconvened in secret. The Zeroin representative arrived last. His posture was rigid. His voice dry. The experiment has failed. It chose Earth, one of the council members said. Why? There was no answer. Another leaned forward, claws tapping against stone. This changes everything. If their young can tame what we could not control. They didn't tame it, the Zeroin rasped. They humanized it. The word hung in the chamber like poison. So, the Arbiter said slowly. What now? The Zeroin stared into the dark. We wait. And we fear what we've awakened. Back on Earth, Ellie drew a new picture. In it she was flying. Not on a plane. Not on a spaceship. On Shadow's back, soaring between stars, her arms open wide. Her smile drawn too big, her feet dangling weightless. She handed the drawing to Helen, who smiled quietly and stuck it to the fridge. Outside, as dusk fell, Shadow sat in the garden. Watching. Listening. Not a monster. Not a weapon. But something else. Something that, once sent to end the world, now guarded it like a sacred flame. And in the distance, among the stars, the ones who had sent it began to reconsider what Earth truly was. Not a backwater. Not a threat. A cradle. And from it, something had risen that even gods should fear.